Hi guys, I'm Bill Olson. A lot of you might know me by my camp name, Ole Olson. I've been involved in camp since I was a ranger in the 70s. I was a camper all the way through into the 80s and then a staff member in the 80s and 90s. I worked as the archery instructor, the naturalist, and unit staff for a couple of years. And I was involved on the advisory board in the transition of camp from Sperry to Johns, and currently I have 2 kids at camp.
Stunning, amazing, adjectives.
Right, yeah, 2 amazing, awesome, super helpful videographer kids and campcraft stars kids at camp.
Oh, I thank you.
Is that better? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So camp was one of the first places that as a young person, I began to learn outdoor skills such as building fires, using my knife, setting up tarp shelters, sailing, small boat piloting, all of those outdoor things that we do at camp. And even if we can't be at camp this summer, we can still be together, and hopefully through presenting some of these skills, you can practice some of these skills at home with your family in your yard, or if you go camping, and be ready to master all that one match fire and using your skills to set up your tarp shelter next summer.
Hi, I'm Kaya. I was a second session wayfarer at camp in 2019.
And I'm Eric. I was a second session pioneer in 2019. Stop. You're in my safety circle.
Oh, sorry, I'll go over here.
Thank you.
Clearly, that was almost a violation of the safety circle rule about using knives safely. But luckily, Eric stopped us before we became unsafe. So, what is the safety circle? The safety circle is the responsibility of whoever is using the knife to make sure that nobody comes in within a circle of arc of their knife, where if their knife were to slip, that someone else could get cut. So if you're carving and somebody starts to enter your safety circle, it's your responsibility to say, hey, I got to put my knife away for a second. You can sheath it, but you need to stop carving and let them know that they're starting to get into your safety circle, which is your safe perimeter for using a knife. You always want to maintain that. You don't ever want to be sitting right next to somebody when you're carving, in case the knife slips. In addition to the safety circle, there's also a safety triangle. Basically, when you're carving and sitting, you always want to make sure that your hands are on your knees so that the path of the knife is always outside of your body. So you never want to carve here where potentially your knife could cut your legs. There's arteries in there, and you just never want to have any part of your body that is within the potential path of the knife if the knife were to slip. So if you're sitting, you want to have hands on knees, leaning forward so that the knife is always outside of your safety triangle here. You can also cut in the kneeling position and just be carving out in front of you like that. That's also safe. You can carve in a standing position. That's safe as long as nobody's within your safety circle. There's no body part that is in front of where the knife could go. You never want to hold a piece of work like this where your fingers are outside of the arc of the knife. That's very dangerous. You always want to be stabilizing things inside of the arc of the knife, and that the arc of the knife potentially is going to always be outside your body and nobody's close around you. So in addition to the forearms on knees position that keeps the arc of the knife outside of your safety circle and away from your arteries, you can also position your work off to your side. You always want to stabilize your work, so when you're gripping whatever you're working on, you want to snug it in tight to your body. So if I grab the stick like this and I put it along my forearm, that's very stable. I can keep the stick stable. I'm braced, and the path of my knife is always going to be outside of my inner safety area, and then as long as you're respecting the safety circle and anybody coming into there, this is a safe position to cut in as well. In addition to safety, considerations about how to cut, you never want to cut towards yourself. You never want to stabilize your work where your hand is outside of the path of where the knife was going to go. In addition to those real basic knife maneuvers, you also want to always remember that when you're getting up and walking, you always want to put your knife away. It's okay to stand carving. It's okay to carve standing. It's okay to carve sitting if you're out here or out here. It's okay to carve kneeling if it's outside, your arc is outside that. But the other thing you want to focus on is that when you're carving, you want to be very intentional. You don't want to be distracted when you're carving. You don't want to be trying to rush and carve really fast in an uncontrolled way. And you want to have a point to what you're doing. So, you know, you can be really excited to get a new knife and you just want to carve something. And so having a plan of, oh, I'm going to learn push cuts or stop cuts or reverse chest lever cut or whatever you're practicing, or I want to make a tarp steak. All of those things would be, you know, a real focused way to do that. And for parents, whenever you start kids working with knives, you do want to supervise them, and you know, depending on their age will depend, and your kid's maturity will depend on how much supervision they need. But certainly when you're introducing anybody to knife skills, you want to be close by and supervising. And again, always remember to have a first aid kit nearby, and that should make your carving experiences great. So, what if you're carving and somebody comes up and asks if they can borrow your knife for a second? There's a safe way to hand a knife off to somebody that you should all know. And what you want to do is hand them the handle, but keep your hand away from the blade of the knife. So what you do is, as you hand it to them, you rotate it into your hand like this. So you're handing them the handle and the blade is always away from you, and you want to make eye contact with them, and they say
Thank you
when they've got it, and then you can let go. If you bumble the handoff and the knife falls, don't try and grab a knife that's falling. Just get your hands out of the way. That's the safest thing to do. So the first cut you're going to want to learn is what's called a stop cut. Basically, this is where the blade is going straight down into the wood. From the side, you can move it back and forth. You can kind of rock it. The downward pressure is hard on that. That creates a vertical slice across the wood. And the reason that this is useful is because then if you do what the next type of cut is, which is called a push cut, you can push towards that and it'll stop right at that point that you made. As you're trying to make your notch deeper, you go back into the stop cut, rock it, push down, make a deeper stop cut, come back, make another push cut, and you can alternate between stop cut and push cut to create notches. And you can see you can create a nice clean notch in a piece of wood. Very useful for all sorts of things you might want to make. Another technique that you can use with a fixed blade knife, but not a folding knife, is what's called baton technique. Basically, you're using another stick or a baton to strike the back of your knife. Again, you can only use this with a fixed blade knife that is of relative thickness, but it's a very useful technique if you need to cut a piece of wood. So this would be a cross-grain baton, and I can cut a real deep cut into that and cut across a piece of wood with a cross grain baton. Another batoning technique is a splitting technique where you're using your knife in case you didn't have an axe or a hatchet or something like that to baton firewood down into small usable pieces. Again, you can't use a log that is, for this length of knife much wider than this, so you're looking at between 2 and 3 inches max probably, but you would strike vertically so you get it started, just pounding down through, and then I'm going to press down with my hand here and I'm tapping on the tip, and I can split out pieces of wood. Let's say it had been raining for a long time, which it's raining right now, and we had to get dry wood, and there was no dry wood that you could find underneath the trees or something like that. You could split out a piece of wood, get to the dry wood in the center, and then you would have dry wood to use for your fire. So that would be a splitting baton technique. So that works as well. Another real powerful but not commonly known technique, perhaps, or less commonly known, is the chest lever technique. In this technique, you reverse the blade, and you're going to use the powerful muscles of your back to basically lever your arms this way and strip off wood. So I've reversed the knife. I'm not holding it this way. I'm reversing that so knife's facing my knuckles. I'm going to keep my hand back from the cutting edge, and then I'm just going to do this. So this is actually a very controlled way to remove a lot of wood quickly. And you can see there's not much, I can generate a lot of force, and there's not a lot of movement of the blade itself. So that's actually a pretty safe technique. And again, you can see that the path of the blade, it never goes towards my body, it's always going away from my body. You can also do variants of that where you do combine that thumb stacking and kind of some scissoring of using that to do finer cuts, and then that's the way it looks. You can see I can take a lot of material off, and that would be hard to do with the other type of cut. Another cut is the knee lever cut. Again, blade is facing outward. I'm using my knee as a brace, and I basically pull the material back. I don't move the knife blade. This is a knee brace cut, and you're just sliding the material. Another technique to strip large amounts of wood relatively quickly. Again, very safe. There's not a lot of errant blade motion. It's all very stabilized and always pointing away from you. Another way to brace your work is bracing against the ground or bracing against a log, and again pushing down and cutting while bracing that piece of wood. This is pretty hard wood. Bracing that piece of wood if you want to shave off material. So what are some of the things that you can make with your knife skills? This is a tarp stake that the kids made to practice some of their cutting skills. So you would be doing a stop cut here, cutting down, and repeated push cut, stop cut, push cut, stop cut, push cut, stop cut, until you get to the depth that you want. And then you can come in and round out the edges where the cord comes around and just clean that up a little bit. It's nice to round off the ends of the steak, so when you're pounding it doesn't mushroom over, so kind of cutting in on the top will allow you to pound that in and have it be just be more sturdy when you're pounding. And then you just sharpen the end if you want to. You could peel it, but you don't really have to do that. And you just pound this in at an angle and then tie off your cord around that to your tarp. So that's a great, pretty basic project that you can make to practice some of your knife cuts. And those knife cuts you can use for a lot of different things, but that will help get you more practiced at making cuts. Here's a different type of tarp stake. So this one, same kind of beveled top, same point, but just using an existing branch that we cut off there. And so then that's where you would tie it. You don't have to cut a notch, but if you had a section of wood and you didn't have a convenient branch, you could always do the push cut, stop cut technique that we just talked about. But here's an alternate teepee stake, or tent stake, or teepee snake, I suppose, but tarp stake that you could use. So this concludes our little segment on knife skills, knife safety, and introduction to bushcraft and campcraft skills with knives. Tomorrow we're going to actually go to Mike Poutaitine's forge and learn all about knife steels and different types of knives and sharpening knives. It's going to be awesome. See you then. Hey, turn around.
I'm kidding. Ouch!
3, 2, 1, we're live.
And I'm Eric. I was at Pioneer, second session. Summer 20. Oh!
We're still live, by the way.
Oh, great. Okay. There you go.
Oh!